So I just recorded this screen capture clip for a gig log talking about this rig rundown, and it was really concise, but while I was filming that, I was thinking about a lot of ways I could elaborate more about the design choices here. So I figured I would just go ahead and ramble a bunch for anyone who's curious. I'm not saying this is like a kind of design like principles video or anything. I'm not a designer. I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm just gonna explain my mindset because I mean I think this is good, and I'll explain why I think it's good, and maybe it'll help some people who are trying to make some designs. This looks really basic to some people, I'm sure, and I don't think it's a complicated rig, but I did think about, you know, everything at least a little bit before just kind of throwing it up there. And at this point, it kind of feels like I'm just throwing things up there because I've been doing it for so long and making rigs that look like this for so long. But I really have thought about a lot of these things, at least a little. So the first thing we'll talk about is moving heads. Why are they where they are, and why are there 8 of them? We're just going to assume that budget is not, you know, the smallest budget in the world. This was not a large budget rig by any means, but it's not like I was limited to only being able to use 2 moving heads, obviously. But I was a strong advocate for using 8. More realistically, we probably only should have used 4 for this budget, but I don't know. Only having 4 moving heads across the truss, because I wouldn't put 2 up here and 2 on the ground, and I'll explain why. But having only 4 moving heads up on the truss, it's just so one-dimensional. In fact, we'll go back to here, and I'll turn off those moving heads. So if we just turn these off, just that alone, I mean, it's so much thinner in terms of aerial effects. And this is it's not a physically small rig, so just having those 4 ground spots, you can see, adds a bunch. We could just do 2 ground spots, so let's see what that would look like. But this is, I don't know, not a great compromise. We could move them so that they're more in between these stage right spots and these stage left spots, but still, I feel like 8 is a solid minimum, and I do mean like a solid minimum for a small rig that looks like a real boy rig. And the reason they're placed where they are is just because they're evenly spaced. We could have 8 along the top, along the truss, but then we would lose all that height, all that depth. Well, depth isn't really the right word, but it would just be such a more one-dimensional rig if we had all the moving heads on the top. So yeah, that's why we have 4 up top and 4 on the bottom. Some people like to get really creative with their moving head placement and their fixture placement in general. And a lot of people might say that this rig is really bland. Like, it's just kind of a grid of fixtures, evenly spaced, very simple. But this, I think, is the move. Obviously, I mean, it's what I did. Clearly, I think it's the move. But the reason I think it's the move is because it leaves the programming options just completely open. It's a blank canvas. If I put these into special clusters or arrange these fixtures in special ways, you could do some really cool looking looks. Like, I know a lot of lighting guys like to talk about looks for stages, but it kind of narrows down things that look good. So like if I were to do, instead of a line of these pars, like if I did like clusters, then anyway, we'll talk about all those things. But the reason being that the spots are the way they're laid out, evenly spaced, is just so that it leaves the programming options completely open, completely blank canvas. That's the way I prefer it. I'm not saying that's a good choice or a bad choice, but again, this video is just talking about what I think is good and why I did these things. So I guess we'll talk about the SlimPars, because they're, you know, either the most boring or the most unusual thing here. It's just a line of SlimPars. Surely no thought has got into this. Why is there a line of SlimPars? And to some extent, yeah, not much thought went into this. We just have a bunch of these. And in fact, the reason we do lines of SlimPars actually goes way back to when we weren't even using DMX lights. But that's a story for another time. Point is, we have all these SlimPars. Let's use them. And we could, again, you know, kind of disperse these out in a unique way along the rig, but that would be, in my opinion, less of a blank canvas. And this line Well, it's a big line for chases. You can also do, you know, patterns on here, and it just kind of washes the whole floor with whatever color or chases that you want. So yeah, we do this all the time, and we think it looks good because it's just a big line. It looks huge when you're there in person. If we got rid of those, or if we did little, you know, pars kind of scattered out, it doesn't have that kind of gravity of this big line. So that's at least some of the logic. I can probably talk a lot about why we do lines of SlimPars in its own video, because I don't see people doing this very frequently, and I don't know. I have a hard time not doing this. Sometimes you do other things, don't get me wrong, but this is just a simple blank canvas. That's the big theme here. And yeah, I guess I could also talk about why. Well, actually, we'll get to that in a second. So I said it was going to be rambly, and I'm holding true to that, to what I said. Next thing we're going to talk about is the Pix-Ms, these vertical LED battens. There's not much more to say about these versus moving heads. They're evenly spaced. They are a blank canvas. But we like these because they're really bright compared to SlimPars. You could argue that we'd only need one of these things. Like, we don't need the Pix-Ms and the SlimPars, because all these SlimPars can do eye candy. And is this just more eye candy, just more of the same? I would say no. I think these are a dramatically different type of fixture. Oops. They're just way brighter. They have a thicker or a more dense pixel density, whatever. They're just more of a, I don't know. They look really strong, whereas these pars, it's not really a line. I mean, it's a line of pars, but it's not like a line, like each picture is in a line. I don't know. That probably doesn't make sense. This Pix-M is just this really strong line, really bright. These also tilt, which I'm not going to demonstrate in capture right now, but they do have or I guess it's a pan in this configuration, which is really cool for sweeping the crowd. It's just, they're a completely different fixture. Yes, they're eye candy, but they're way brighter, so we use them for impact. And yeah. As for the reason why they're placed just in the middle of the line, again, just a blank canvas. We could kind of, you know, maybe do some tiered stuff, which doesn't look bad. But the reason I didn't do that is because I didn't have any longer F31 single tube truss, because I don't like how this one gets pushed the whole way up here. I think it gives this uneven skew to kind of pulling your eye really high up, which I don't like. If I could have these all more like this, maybe I would have considered that more, but it's still not as even of a canvas. Just in my opinion, this draws your eye, and I don't want eyes necessarily to be drawn, although this does look really nice. So yeah, the main reason I didn't give this more of a thought is because these F31, in reality, these are actually 2 meter sections in this viz, but these are actually a 1.5 meter in the inventory. So this is as far down as we could have them, and you can see that in the actual main video. I have a link in the description. These were as far down on the single tube trusses as they could go, and I didn't like the idea of having this one jacked the whole way up here. I also don't like the idea of kind of doing the stepping, just because it seems to add variety just for the sake of adding variety. I don't really think this looks that much better. It just kind of breaks up the canvas. And that's not to say this doesn't look good. I just want as blank a canvas as possible. I thought that was the right thing to do. Plus, when you push these up for eye candy effects, I don't think it's any worse. I think it's, if you like this more, then that's fine. And I don't think it looks bad at all. I think it looks good for eye candy. But it does pull away from impact, because these are really, really bright fixtures, which we like to use to really smack people in the face with light. But now that this fixture is so high, or if we did it the other way, these are going clear over people's heads. And that's not to say they're not bright when they're at that height, but when these are pointed straight at your face, or as close to it as possible, they are much brighter on axis. So I didn't want to lose the impact either. You could argue that I didn't need to worry about impact because we had these China pars, which we were really using for dedicated impact, but I still wanted to keep this, again, open, flat, empty canvas kind of concept. The diamond, there's nothing really to talk about here. The logo is a diamond for the client. So we put some LED bars around the diamond, and that's it. I think of this as one fixture. And that's just kind of all there is to it. They're very similar to the Pix-Ms in terms of what they look like. Yeah, I mean, that's all there is to it. That's the logo. Some people ask us, like, why do we use the diamond, and they're like, oh, I want to do a rig with a diamond. We're not doing the diamond because we think it's like some kind of revelation. It's the logo for the client. We don't use the diamond at anything besides these events where I should say the client is more of an organization, and we do a bunch of their events. So yeah, we have this diamond in stock because we do a bunch of them. We don't use the diamond literally anywhere else. So it's funny to me when people are like, oh yeah, do a rig with a diamond. Like, that's, I don't know. The only reason we use the diamond is for logos. Or this client's logo, I should say. And then we have these, I alluded to earlier, these China Pars. These are just RGBAW crap. They're really bright, really wide. And we use them, like I said, for impact effects, kind of like fake strobes. And because of those, you could say, well, I could sacrifice this impact and just give more eye candy. But again, I don't feel like this is better eye candy. It's just kind of different eye candy. You might think it's better. That's totally fine. But yeah, these are just for impact. Again, they're evenly spaced because I want a blank canvas. But another reason these are evenly spaced is just to give the most even amount of blasting the crowd. So if I turn those up the whole way, Capture does a pretty good job of visualizing this. One quick side note, I know these are labeled as Wash FX2s, and that's what we wanted to use, but when it came down to it, we didn't have 8 available, so we were stuck with generic Chinese Pars. They're very similar to Wash FX2s. Wash FX2s are brighter, but yeah, just wanted to clear that up. I keep saying China Pars, and we did use China Pars. Even though it says Wash FX2, we did use China Pars. The whole stage becomes just this massive wall of light, which is really good for impact. If I were to cluster these, it would just be less even. You might have more localized spots of impact, but I just don't like that as much. I would much rather have, like, for example, I could bring these guys up here and do like zones of 2, so it looks more like a conventional blinder or something. But then all the power is coming from the top versus coming from up here and in the middle, which, you know, I just think that's better, because if you're front row, this is another thing I can talk about. If you're front row, I'm a big advocate for making sure the front row experience is extremely adequate. Or, I don't know, I shouldn't say adequate. I should say making sure the front row experience is just as good as anywhere else in the room. Because that might sound like it's a given, but I've been to too many shows where as you get closer to the rig, you see less of the lights, which just is just so backwards to me. When you get closer to the stage, the music should be louder, you should be closer to the artist, and the light should be more intense. Or at least as intense as when you're farther back. So if I were to move these up, you can even see it from this viewpoint. And I'm not saying that Capture has the best viewing angle for this kind of idea, but if I'm front row and I'm looking at the DJ, if I'm actually probably a little too high, and if I'm looking at the stage and those are all the way up here, you know, I'm not getting smacked in the face with impact. Yeah, the Pix-Ms kind of cover up for it, but why not bring those back down? Because then I have an even spread everywhere, and front row is still really impactful. And that's just really important to me. That's another reason for the ground spots being so important, because there are just too many shows that I've been to, like I said, that when you get closer to the stage, it gets less impactful, the lighting does. That's because most of their lighting rigs are like up really high over the stage, which is understandable of why they have to deploy it that way. But this is why I like to do things this way, because I want to make sure the front row experience is proportionally more intense. So I think that's it. I think that's all I had to ramble about. That's the reason that this is so bland looking, is because I want a big canvas, just a completely blank big canvas for programming effects. If I could, I would have a blank canvas style rig plus creative zones and creative shapes. But because this is all I have for this rig, this is why it's laid out this way. The spots are evenly spaced, and then we have ground spots because I want a blank canvas, and having the ground spots adds a ton of depth to the rig. The SlimPar's in a straight line because it has a lot of, I don't know, a lot of gravity of being this big line for chases and eye candy. That's something I didn't talk about, is eye candy versus moving heads. I talked about this in the main video, but I'll say it again here. We really don't like overly moving head heavy rigs. There are just too many rigs that people will just take 2 or 3 dozen moving heads and like some strobes, and that's it. And I just, that doesn't do it for me. The reason being that you can't get all the nuances of different sounds and different feelings in songs with just moving heads. And you might totally disagree, but I feel like you need to have wash fixtures. You need to have eye candy fixtures to capture certain feelings in certain songs. If you have just a bunch of moving heads, for starters, your impact is you're completely relying on your strobes or blinders or whatever. Here, I have fixtures that are really bright, plus then I have kind of strobes on top of that. So I have layers of impact. So I have my moving heads, which you can get impact out of, don't get me wrong. Then I have these bright fixtures, which are eye candy and also impact, which are more impactful moving heads, much more. And then on top of that, I have these kind of dedicated strobes, which are even more. So it's just layers, which I guess is another concept here, is a blank canvas and having layers of impact and layers of tools to use for recreating feelings in songs. If you just have a bunch of moving heads and strobes, you don't have layers. You have a ton of moving heads, which might look good for a variety of events, but generally we really want to have a balance between eye candy, impact, and moving heads. And I have realized that over the years, this ratio is kind of close to 3-to-1 or 2-to-1, somewhere between 2 to 3-to-1. So you might think that this rig is not following that whatsoever because of the 16 SlimPars and because of these 8 lights on the diamond. But in my mind, these are banks of 4 because if let's say I had 24 SlimPars against 8 moving heads, well, that doesn't, in my mind, meet the ratio because 1 SlimPar is not eye candy, but 4 SlimPars is essentially 1 piece of eye candy or impact. So that's just kind of why I'm treating these as banks of 4. Plus, we rig them, we pre-rig them on these F31 bars in banks of 4. So this is one fixture, this is one fixture, this is one fixture. So if we count this up, we have 4 banks of SlimPars, 8 China Pars, 6 Pix-Ms, and the diamond I'm also treating as one fixture because it almost is always used that way. Like we do some zoning on it, but it's essentially one multi-zone fixture. And so if you add all those things up, you get 19 impact and eye candy fixtures against 8 spots, which is not 3-to-1 or 2-to-1, somewhere in between. And if I look at a lot of the rigs that I've designed that I feel like are a good balance, they're all in that range of 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. So again, that's just what I feel. I have nothing to back up any of my opinions. This is just the mindset and the logic thought process that I have gone through when I think about how to lay out a rig like this. So yeah, blank canvas, 3 or 2-to-1 ratio of eye candy and impact moving heads. And yeah, now I should say I could have twice as many moving heads here if they were a different type. So like I could add 8 beams, and because I'm not going to have necessarily all the time all 16 beams on, then I maintain that ratio because I'd be using either 8 beams or 8 spots depending on the song for different things. So that would still kind of maintain this this ratio, kind of. It's kind of breaking the rule, but I don't know. That's a topic for a different day. I can make a whole video about eye candy and impact versus moving heads. So yeah, I didn't have any notes for this video. I just decided to ramble while I had this open. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. Hopefully you found this at least a little insightful, even though I'm rambling and just talking really fast because I'm just the thoughts are flowing. So yeah, there you go. We got these spots in a grid. We got the line of SlimPars. We got the Pix-Ms in a straight line at this height because I don't want them higher because you lose impact, and I don't need the eye candy like that. I don't think it's any better. And I was limited by these F31s. Diamond is one fixture. One rig. Diamond is one fixture. It's just for the logo for the clients. And these pseudo strobe China Par things are arranged like this because I want impact evenly distributed front to back, left to right, up and down. Yeah. So there you go. Maybe you learned a little something about how my brain works, and maybe it puts into words some I don't know, some of your other design philosophies. I've seen people do things like this, but I don't know. I just felt like rambling about at least my thought process while I have it open. So there you go.